I've been into the outdoors since I was about 10 years old, and have been camping and hiking for many years now. My family is from the North Woods of Wisconsin, but we moved to Texas when I was around 12. We spent most summers up in northern Wisconsin, where my dad grew up and still has some land that he owns there with his brother and sister-in-law. We would go up there for a week or two at a time, stay in the family cabins that my father built when he was younger. I've spent many nights alone in those cabins, sometimes with my brother, sometimes by myself. They're about 20 miles from the nearest town, and you have to take a dirt road for about 10 miles before getting to the family land. Listen, my brother is 6'4", I'm 5'10", so we both felt pretty safe up there, even at night when it was pitch black outside. There's no cell service up there either, which made us feel more isolated than normal. There are also some big game animals in that area, but we never had any issues. We would also go hunting up there as well, but I'll get to that in a later story. So anyway, this happened about 5 years ago. My brother and I had been up there for about a week, but we were leaving the next day to go back home to Texas. It was around 9 p.m., pitch black outside, no moon. We were in one of the two cabins playing video games, having some beers before going to bed. The cabin has two doors on it, one leading into a bedroom area, which is separated by another room by a half wall, and the other door leading into a living room/kitchen area. The cabin also has two windows, one in each of those rooms. We were playing video games when we heard something outside the front window of the cabin, which was only about 10 feet away from us. It sounded like somebody was banging on that window with their fists, but it wasn't rhythmic, like somebody would do if they were knocking on a door. It was more like someone was hitting a window randomly, but it was loud. My brother and I looked at each other with our eyes wide open, not knowing what to think or do next. We both got up from the couch, walked over to that front window, trying to see who or what was outside in the darkness of night. We couldn't see anything because there wasn't any light shining out from inside of that cabin. After about 30 seconds or so, we heard something hit the same window again, this time sounding louder than before. My brother yelled, "Who's there?" as he started banging on one of those windows with his fist, just like whoever or whatever it was outside had been doing. At first, nothing happened for about 10 seconds. Then we heard some movement coming toward us through the brush behind our cabin, which is where my dad has an old trailer parked back there, along with a couple of ATVs and tool sheds. We could hear something or someone walking through the brush, but we couldn't see anything because it was pitch black out. My brother and I were both pretty scared at this point, not knowing what to do next. All of a sudden, we heard some movement on the roof above us as well, like something was running around up there or jumping from one side to another. We looked at each other again with our eyes wide open in fear, wondering who or what that could be up there. The only thing that came to mind for me was maybe my dad's dog had snuck into one of those cabins while we weren't paying attention and somehow got on the roof. After about 5 minutes of hearing whatever it was run around on the top of our cabin, jumping back and forth, my brother finally yelled, "Get off our property!" He then grabbed his shotgun, which is always loaded with buckshot shells. He opened up the doors leading out of the cabin, but again we couldn't see anything. We could still hear whatever it was running around on the roof. So he aimed his shotgun and prepared to fire. He emptied one of those 3 rounds into the air, then stopped for a minute to listen for any movement or sounds coming in that direction. All we heard were some coyotes yipping in the distance, which is common at night. My brother told me to grab my flashlight and follow him as he walked towards our dad's trailer, which was only a little bit away from the cabin. When we got over there, I noticed something sitting down against one of those tires, a huge pile of deer guts. It looked like someone had torn open an entire deer carcass and just dumped all of its insides onto that tire. The smell coming off of it was absolutely putrid, like rotten meat mixed with feces. There were also pieces missing from this deer carcass as well, like someone or something had been eating parts off it while they sat here next to this trailer. We both stood there looking at each other in shock, wondering what happened, who did this. As soon as I said, "What do you think happened?" my brother yelled, "Wendigo." Wendigo is basically a cannibalistic creature, living amongst humans during winter months when food sources are scarce up north, where my family has land, and where I've spent many nights alone camping and hiking before too. This encounter scared us pretty bad. Neither one of us wanted to stay up north anymore after experiencing something like this late at night, all by ourselves, without cell service or anybody else around. Thankfully, none of us ever saw what exactly made all these noises, nor did we ever see whatever tore apart that dead deer. I've been interested in the paranormal for as long as I can remember, but have never had an encounter of my own. My parents were pretty skeptical about these things and didn't really encourage me to believe in them either, so it's not like they told me stories that planted ideas into my head or anything like that. Anyway, this happened when I was around 8 in the summer of 1990. I was at my grandparents' house in New Jersey with my parents and younger brother. My grandfather at the time had a large yard that backed up to woods, so we spent most of our time outside when we were there. One night, after everybody else went to bed, I decided to go out back for some fresh air by myself and ended up sitting on the back porch steps. It was a very clear night. I could see a lot of stars. I decided to lay down and look at them for a while. This is when it happened. All of a sudden, something landed next to me with a thud that made me jump in surprise. At first, I thought it might have been my grandfather's cat. It liked to sneak out at night, but then I noticed that it was a lot bigger than a cat. At this point, my head started racing and I couldn't move because of the sheer amount of terror. Then, whatever landed next to me stood up on two legs and turned around so that it was facing me directly. It looked like a man from behind and had dark, leathery skin. It was about the same height as me, but I was 8 years old at the time, so that might not mean much. It had long, bony fingers, and its head looked like a cross between a man's and an alligator's. The eyes were what scared me the most. They were glowing in color. After staring at each other for about 30 seconds or so, it suddenly seemed surprised, turned around, and ran back into the woods as fast as it could without making any noise. It seemed shocked that I saw it. When I finally got up off my feet again after this happened, I sprinted inside to tell my parents what had happened. But when we went outside together with flashlights, there was no sign of anything unusual out there whatsoever. I have no idea what I saw that night, and I have no idea what lives back there in those woods. Unfortunately, in the years to come, my grandparents would both pass away, and that property would get sold off. It's okay though, because I've had no intentions of going back there. All I can say is, whoever owns it now, hopefully, they don't have encounters with the same thing. I grew up in northern Michigan. I spent many weekends camping with my family out at our cabin on Lake Ann. The cabin is just about 3 miles from civilization, down a dirt road that turns to gravel, and then finally pavement as you get closer to town. The cabin is on the lake, and a beautiful place to camp. In fact, there are only 3 cabins in this area, and we're the last one on the road. We had an old beagle named Hound Dog who loved to chase rabbits around our yard and even sleep under our porch, with his head resting on his paws. Hound Dog was not much of a guard dog, but he would let you know if someone or something was approaching by barking up a storm before they even got close enough for us to see them through the woods surrounding our whole property. One summer evening, my parents decided it would be fun for all 5 of us kids to go out and try to catch some fish for dinner. My older brother was a Boy Scout, something he loved, and had taught me how to tie a fishing line onto hooks, so we all grabbed our poles, waded into the lake with Hound Dog following along. We were not far from shore when I felt something brush up against my leg underwater. Probably just an eel or a snake swimming by, I thought. But it freaked me out enough that I swam back to shore as fast as possible. The sun was setting at this point, and it got pretty dark quickly in those woods. We decided that since we weren't going to catch any fish, we'd head back home for dinner instead of trying again later in the cabin. As soon as we walked through the front door of our cabin, Hound Dog started barking like crazy. His hackles raised on his neck like he saw something off in the distance behind us. I looked over my shoulder towards where he was looking, but didn't see anything unusual. So I turned around again, only to find him running away from us down one of our hallways towards what used to be one of our bedrooms, before it was converted into storage space after my parents divorced. Hound Dog ran into the room, jumped up onto a shelf where he stood looking down at us, his hackles still raised. We all looked towards the bedroom door to see what had scared him so much, but we didn't see anything. Then my youngest brother yelled, "Hey, there's someone in there." I looked again, and this time I saw it. This huge hairy figure standing just inside our doorway, staring back at us. It was too dark to make out any other details other than it was very tall and very hairy. It looked like it was trying to decide whether or not to come out of the room toward us. I yelled at my brothers and sisters to run. We all ran back outside into our yard, where we could see each other clearly in the moonlight. As soon as I turned around, I saw that Hound Dog had run with us, but he didn't follow when he headed for home. We were so freaked out by this point that none of us wanted to go back inside our cabin alone, even though it was a 2-story house and there were 5 kids between 12 and 18 years old living there during the summer months. My oldest brother grabbed his rifle from his truck, which was parked just outside the front door, and we all piled in and locked the doors. We spent the rest of the night sitting on our couch with my brother's rifle pointed at the front door. The next morning, I got up early to go fishing before anybody else was awake, hoping to catch a fish for breakfast. As soon as I stepped outside, Hound Dog came running out from under our porch and followed me down towards the lake. I didn't see anything unusual while fishing, but when I returned home later that day, there were scratch marks around one of our windows, like something had tried prying it open during the night. My parents said they hadn't heard anything whatsoever. My parents claim they hadn't heard anything, so whatever made those scratches must have been very quiet, or happened after everybody went to bed, because nobody woke up until morning. We never saw it again, but we did hear strange sounds coming from deep within those woods over time, especially late at night when it was dark. It sounded almost like someone or something screaming into a microphone, then playing back the recording through an old speaker system with static throughout, which would fade in and out randomly throughout each scream, screech, and whistle sound they made. I should also elaborate a little more on the whole creature getting into our cabin. So that storage room in question also has an extension, I guess you can call it. This extension has sliding glass doors that lead right out to the back, where all the dense woods are. More often than not, my parents would leave that wide open. For whatever reason, I'm not sure, but I think it was to create a draft and get some fresh air in the house. The problem is, they usually left the door open that led to the rest of the house, so air would just flow freely without anybody supervising. This meant that anything could pretty much just walk into the house if it wanted to, or anyone. And in the past, we had had issues with raccoons and possums deciding to come and investigate. Those curious little buggers. It was only on this evening that we had this thing try to get into the house by standing in the doorway. I hope that makes a little more sense, because you might hear this and think, how on earth was there a creature in your house? Well, that's why. I should also state that it didn't make it far past the sliding glass door. I've seen UFOs, Bigfoot, and have encountered the Mothman. How's that for an introduction? This encounter happened in 2017 while I was living in Michigan. It was around 3 in the morning. I woke up to use the restroom. As soon as I got out of bed, there were these 2 bright lights shining through my window that seemed like they were from a craft or something. In fact, they were so bright, it lit up my entire room with this eerie glow. The light didn't move at all, but just kind of hovered outside my window, and being in a sleep stupor, I was half asleep, half trying to process what this was. I almost felt controlled, as if I was pulled back into my bed and fell asleep again, until about 6:30, when I heard choppers flying over my house like crazy. When I looked out the window, there were multiple black choppers flying very low over my house. I mean, they were obviously going somewhere, they weren't coming to my house. Just wanted to make that distinction. But there were several of them, all black and unmarked. Since my home is also near a very popular road, I saw a huge convoy of trucks as well, heading in that direction. I don't know if what happened to me at 3 in the morning and this huge rush of military vehicles going in whatever direction they were going in had any part to play, but I do find it weird. I've had issues with UFOs before visiting me. Now, I'm not saying these bright lights illuminating my room were UFOs, but it's definitely a strange coincidence if you think about it. Shortly after this, I moved down to Florida.